Well, it's a big night for political watchers. Carla Beck and Scott Moe are going toe-to-toe in the only leaders debate of this provincial election. They're both making a case for your votes, and so are all the other parties and independent candidates knocking on your door these days. But you can't cast a ballot without Election Saskatchewan, and they've been very busy preparing for all these elections. Michael Boda is Chief Electoral Officer of Saskatchewan, and he joins us now in our Regina studio. Great to have you back, Michael.
Good to be with you, Peter.
So how are you dealing with the provincial election and all these municipal elections coming up pretty close together?
Well, I'm not sure it's so much a challenge for us. It's more of a challenge for the voter. You have to make sure you understand what the different issues are out there. We do have issues in the sense that we need about 5,000 workers from across the province. But, Peter, we're in pretty good shape. You remember back in 2020, that was a very difficult election to find workers for. We are actually in very good shape for this election. We've built a community over the last cycle of individuals who are interested in being involved in elections. And so we have been communicating with them, and they came out in numbers. So we're in pretty good shape. There may be a few areas where we're a couple short here and there. Returning officers are working on that across the province.
Is that something you want to pitch now to people, or is it?
As I say, we're really in pretty good shape.
Okay,
so
good.
I'm pleased to report.
Well, Michael, that being said, you said it's not a huge issue for you right now, but 3 years ago and for the past few years, you've been talking about, recommending moving those municipal elections to May of this year and every 4 years thereafter, right? You had said that a couple years ago.
Absolutely.
That was ignored. Just how do you feel about having to do this now?
Well, I think it continues to be a challenge, but I think the voters themselves understand that as we go through this process, because you're seeing signs for municipal elections, you're seeing signs for provincial elections, and then of course we have a variety of other electoral activities going on south of the border that is obviously distracting people, and then there are questions of when there'll be an election federally. So it is always a challenge in that regard. I've made my recommendations as Chief Electoral Officer. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not a legislator. It's not my role to make that decision, but I'm asked as an expert to give my advice, and I've given that advice twice, and I continue to see some challenges out there.
You've also talked many times about modernizing our system, of course. In fact, almost exactly 2 years ago and 2 days, you made recommendations on our show on, when and where we can vote, and also increasing the integrity of our election system. Did any of that come to fruition? Are there any changes? Are we modernizing this system?
Well, the word modernization is a great word, and I think it really has to be coupled with our desire to expand access to voters across the province. And so that's what modernization is really about. It's about broadening access for people. And what we're trying to do is serve the 2024 voter as opposed to the 1905 voter.
Right.
And in 1905, of course, you had one geographic location. You had only a few hours and you had to show up and vote. And what we're doing is we're broadening that access for people across the province, particularly in rural and remote areas where they didn't have the same access that we have in the city. So there is this broadening that's going on. There's different ways we're doing that.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, the first and foremost, we've introduced the concept of voting week. It's not been used elsewhere in the country yet. We have been evolving in this direction, but basically it starts on October the 22nd and goes all the way to October the 28th. There is no voting on the Sunday.
Right.
We hope to do that in the future, of course. But you have voting week, and there is no better day to vote. There is no longer an election day. There's a last day of voting, but there's no longer an election day. So you can vote on the first day, you can vote on the second up to the fifth, and then the seventh day. So please, that's one way we're doing it.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, the other is vote by mail, and you will recall.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
Okay. In 2020, we introduced vote by mail as part of our modernization plan. We had not anticipated doing that till 2028, but, well, COVID came along and we instituted it very quickly, and it was well received, very well received. About 13% of voters made use of a ballot, vote by mail ballot, and people are making use of it now. I don't anticipate it'll be exactly at the same level as COVID, the COVID election, but we're looking at 8 to 10%. And I do want to emphasize that the deadline to apply is this Saturday at 11:59 p.m. You can go online and you can apply right there, and it is very easy, and you will receive your ballot in the mail. So
Yeah,
that's one option.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people might think, oh, it's too late to mail and vote, but it's not.
It's not. So that deadline is this Saturday, as I said. And please go to elections.sk.ca, and you can certainly apply there.
Michael, I wanted one more question about mail-in ballots. When are they counted? I always assume that they're the last thing that's counted. Do you know?
They are counted, so there will be a last day of voting count in which we count the in-person votes, and so that will be important. 2 days later, we will count all of the vote-by-mail ballots that we've received up to October the 26th. Now, others will mail in their ballots up to the 8 p.m. on the 28th,
right,
of course. And so those will continue to trickle in. And by law, it's been this way for a very long time. We have a final count 12 days after the last day of voting, and the rest of them will be counted at that point, along with some others that take time to redistribute and be ready to count then.
What can you tell us about early voting?
Well, early voting starts October the 22nd. That's next Tuesday. And it's, during those first 5 days, voting takes place from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then, as I said before, there's a pause on Sunday. And then on October the 28th, the last day of voting from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And, there's 56 hours of voting. That's another way you've seen an expansion. I believe in 2016 it was around 41 hours of voting. We've expanded that and opened it up, and also put voting locations in more convenient locations.
I know back when Alberta voted, we had you on the show, and I had to ask, it's like, did you learn anything from that system? But so are we still counting ballots by hand here in Saskatchewan?
We are. The legislators decided after I made some recommendations on using vote counting equipment that we would count them by hand for this election, and that is what we're doing. We will, in some areas, we'll be testing some. We're getting away from you will recall the paper voters list, and the pencils and the rulers, and we've moved away from that in mostly the urban areas because we can test it this time around, and we will be expanding that as we move into 2028. So it will be a quicker experience. I would like to say that voter information cards are coming to you in the mail this week. Canada Post is managing it. I believe there'll be over 800,000 of those cards coming in. Bring that card with you to the poll. You don't have to, but it's kind of like your Fast Pass. You bring it in, and we can scan that quickly and find you on the list. It makes it a lot easier for you and for us to administer.
Does counting by hand mean that we'll have to wait longer to get our election results?
It will. And we demonstrated how quick the count is during 3 by-elections that were held last summer. We used vote counting equipment. It is a very, very fast and accurate process. But we will see the traditional length. Sometimes we're out there counting at midnight. It just depends on the process, and it will depend on the size of the voting station as well, because we have some smaller voting stations out in rural areas, very small last day of voting locations, but there'll be larger ones in the city because it's a very condensed area, and so you have more ballots in the ballot box.
And you'd like to see that change, though, by the next election? Again, is that going to be one of your recommendations?
Well, I can't make news today because what I'm doing is we go through this electoral process, and we're the only province in the country that has a team of social scientists working with me to gather data so that we can better understand this electoral process and get better at it in 2028. And that's part of a report that I will write, and I will make recommendations again to the Legislative Assembly based on the data that I'm collecting. We do do survey research as well with voters or workers, it's an ongoing process in which I want our recommendations, my recommendations, to be based on data and information.
Michael, we always appreciate you coming on.
It is great to be here.